Well, welcome back to 42nd Street Pete's Grindhouse and another edition of Really Shitty Cinema. And our turd of the day is something called Delta Force from 1986, starring Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin, Robert Forster, Martin Balsam, Lainie Kazan, who else? Shelley Winters. I said Martin Balsam already. Anyway, this whole thing was shot by those wonderful, wacky Israelis, Menachem Golan and whatever the hell is, Gorbulus or whatever from Canon Films. And unfortunately, this is Lee Marvin's last movie because Lee was pretty much dying during the shoot and looked like shit. The original choice for his character, however, was Charles Bronson, as Canon had both Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson under contract. And the reason they had Charles Bronson under contract was because one of his last films, Telephone, really bombed, and producers were loath to meet his asking price, which was over $1 million at the time. So anyway, they said at Canon they had two piles of scripts on the desk. One said Chuck, one said Charlie. Obviously, Charlie couldn't do the missing in action shit, so the scripts were pretty much interchangeable. But back to our feature at hand, which is basically based on the ill-fated attempt of ours to rescue the Iranian hostages back in whatever. So anyway, it ends, it starts with something disastrous like that, and then a plane is hijacked by Arab terrorist Abdul, played by Robert Forster, who was actually the only fucking good fucking thing about this movie, that he's the focal point of the movie. Let's put it this way. Lee looks like he's half in the grave. Chuck is as wooden as usual. There's the usual explosions, cars blowing up, some shooting at the end, of course, a face-off, between Abdul and Nick, Chuck's character. Pretty much was over 2 fucking hours. I guess they were trying to do something like an airport type thing, make it dramatic and shit, but it was also pretty boring and pretty much, I don't think it could be shot today because at one point Abdul realizes there is Israeli passengers on there and wants all the men rounded up, and it's reminiscent of Dachau or whatever, because I think Martin Balsam has a tattoo here or something like that. So pretty much in bad taste it wouldn't be shot today. But anyway, I remember seeing this in the movies and it really didn't impress me that much, and on a second watch it didn't impress me at all, just basically wasted over 2 hours of my life. I've never bought Chuck Norris as a fucking actor. It seems that all the 70s tough guys like Bronson, Van Cleef, Eastwood, Reynolds, etc. were replaced by these fucking martial artists in the 80s, which, were pretty, you had Norris, you had the out-of-control Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, who used to hurt stuntmen. You had Jeff Speakman, another name that inspires fear in people's voices, and I think a guy named John Ryan from Australia would kill or be killed, but they weren't actors. They were just stuck in there because they were martial artists, and that seemed to be the thing. How bad an actor is Chuck Norris? Well, let me enlighten you with, this is still available at 42ndstreetpete.net. This is from an excerpt from an interview with William Winkler, who was friends with Jonathan Harris. I got to take my glasses off to read this because I got to get my eyes checked. Anyway, Jonathan taught Chuck Norris acting for Chuck's first film, Good Guys Wear Black. He was hired by the director. Jonathan thought Chuck was a bad actor, and like a puppeteer, he tried to show Chuck how to act in every scene except the fighting and stunt sequences. Sound familiar? Anyway, it was awful for Jonathan. In one scene, Chuck was in an airport and he walked up to a girl behind a ticket booth. Working behind a ticket booth. Jonathan explained the scene to him and said, "Now, Chuck, you're going to walk up to this sexy girl, you're going to say your lines, but as you do so, you're going to look at her and think, I want to fuck her." It was impossible. Chuck did it half-assed. Later at location in Indian Dunes, Chuck started getting pissed off at Jonathan's coaching. "Why do I have to say all these fucking lines? Clint Eastwood doesn't talk. Charles Bronson doesn't talk." Jonathan replied, "You want to tell the director that?" A knock came on the dressing room door. "We're ready, Chuck." "Well, we aren't," barked Jonathan. They rehearsed the scene again, and Jonathan blew up. He jumped to his feet as they hit Jonathan, and Jonathan said, "Chuck, you raise 1 foot to me, I'm gone forever." Chuck slowly sat back down. Later on the set, the director had the actor stand on the hill with Chuck on the lower part. Chuck looked shorter than the guy he was speaking to, and after the scene was shot, Jonathan walked over to Chuck and said, "Do you know what happened?" Chuck replied, "No, what? You look like a fucking midget." Another lesson learned. At the end of every day, Chuck's wife would pester Jonathan. "Is my husband going to be a superstar? Is my husband going to be a superstar?" And Jonathan would tell her over and over again, "The picture will tell us, the picture will tell us." Finally, at the film's premiere, when the movie was over, she approached him again. "Well, you saw it. Is my husband going to be a superstar?" Jonathan, nearly having thrown up seeing Chuck's awful acting performance, replied, "The next picture will tell us that." When the picture wrapped, Chuck gave Jonathan a present for all his hard work, and to Jonathan's surprise, it was a plaque with a carving of Chuck's face on it. "Thanks, Chuck," is all Jonathan could say. Jonathan was supposed to receive 1% of the gross from Good Guys Wear Black, but a standard operating procedure, he never saw a penny of it. When Chuck Norris went on to become a superstar, it floored Jonathan. Who the hell would have thought that Chuck would actually make it? It's unbelievable, and I'm stunned to this day. So that was Jonathan Harris, Dr. Smith's take on what a great actor Chuck was. I don't understand his popularity. I know when they did one of the Expendables, due to his presence in the film, it had to be cut back to a PG-13 instead of an R. Whatever the fuck, I don't know. So anyway, I wasted 129 minutes of my life on this miserable movie. Don't make the same mistake unless you're a complete die-hard Lee Marvin fan, which I was, and this one isn't going into the archives. So that's our show for today. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. Above all, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.